Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 310 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to work on better radars and solar panels. Enjoy! What other items do we need to make? We got some military stuff, specifically the next tier of radar. Seems good, it's just going to cover an even wider area. Don't really need to replace the factory's current radars, but there's also no reason not to make the better ones for whenever we need to place new radars down for whatever reason. But where are they? Radar. Down there. Okay. Well, we can try to do it in line if possible. And we might as well take this as an opportunity to upgrade the machines. Put the better modules in there. And the better radar. And this is probably a situation where we would want to use our buffer chests. It's kind of a weird situation in that we are very rarely overloaded on them to where they would actually fly in here instead. But nonetheless, this is something that could do that. And it looks like, because I see those Roboport doors there, that it looks like these were set to passive providers because they were jumping around here. So that's actually a situation for a buffer chest as well. Basically, anytime something might find its way into your storage chest that you really don't want them to be there, then they should be buffer chests instead. So I want to set this as well, but since this is the only place for the radars to go, it doesn't really matter. But for now, we can just set it to 50. And we can kind of do the same thing with everything else here. So we'll do another one, now set to our radar 4. And now we don't have to worry about filters or anything, that they will much more actively find their way in there. Set to those 10 items again. And now we have all of those items we have to deliver, but these things run so infrequently, it seems kind of excessive to give them their own belt, because a lot of these things aren't really made enough to require a belt. So I'm actually going to let the robots just fly from over here for the purposes of making radars here. So let's test it out and do our one requester chest here. But we'll probably want to have 2. I'll show you why, because when we copy over, it's going to copy this one over as well, the radar item, which is coming from up here, which we don't want. So we copy them over, take the radar out, then put it there. And it's still requesting a ton of items, but at least now it's only in one chest rather than 3 chests full of a ton of items. That just seems like so many. I mean, what's the maximum that this thing can go at? 42 items a second. Yeah, I'm not sure if I just want to let this have tons and tons of items in here or not. I wonder if there's a mod that can change the default amount of time that pasting the recipe over does. Probably. I kind of want to test that real quick, so I will be back in a second. Alright, I'm back. And based on all the changes here, you can assume that I found something. And I did. It's called the Additional Paste Settings mod, and luckily most of these settings you can change on a per player basis, which means in the middle of playing your game. But it allows you to change the paste settings for recipes to basically be any kind of condition you want. Vanilla Factorio is based on time spent. In other words, it gives you 30 seconds of resources for that assembly machine. But the problem is 30 seconds of resources, especially when you have upgraded Bob's machines, could actually be an insane amount, which is what we were kind of running into before. So you can set it to just give you a certain amount of stacks or a certain amount of recipes worth. So I set it to recipe and then 5, so it'll hold on to 5 recipes worth of resources. Now this actually isn't very much for a fast machine, like all of these right here. But the problem is they just don't make things very often. So when you set it to just 5, like with this chemical plant here, it's just a couple of resources, even though the bots won't get here fast enough to produce at a full rate. So you'd want to adjust it based on whatever works for you. And one other thing you can do is additive values, where you can click on something multiple times to get greater numbers added on there. So we can test this out, and we'll just put something right there. So if we paste it, it just gives us our 1. But if we paste it again, and it's cool that you have this thing floating up, you can see every time I do that, I get another 5. And if we put this one on here, it adds it in as well. So you kind of have to be careful there on what you do to make sure that it doesn't mess things up too bad. So I'm going to disable that functionality for now, because I feel that just setting it to 5 is a pretty convenient thing. And I use that opportunity to change as many of these machines as my patience allowed, and it was exactly this, so about half of them. Because I went through here and switched every storage chest out to a buffer chest, which under normal circumstances won't mean anything, but if we ever get overloaded on a particular machine, it means they will be placed here and not in the storage warehouse, which is what we want to see. And all of these requesters are pulling from buffer chests, which are all up here. So hopefully all of these settings are correct. It's possible a few of them are messed up, but we'll find out later. And I put the machines nice and close together, even though I kind of messed up in a sense where you can't really walk between these, so it's a little annoying. But I can also just kind of fly. But it's not like coming through here and picking stuff up is something that happens very often. It's almost always bots that are doing things. So I will deal with that small inconvenience. But you can see how much less space it takes. And I'll move the other ones later when I feel like it, but as you can see by all of this going on, that I had an insane amount of extra machines. And actually this is a lot less than it used to be. But you see, all of these machines were way more than we needed. Like in some cases we had hundreds of extra machines. So I set each one to only be 10, because I was thinking, well, if we're doing a big construction and then it needs like 200 machines, and then we move it at the end, it will have the 200 machines and then bring the extra 200 back. So I set this to only be 10, so when we're building something new, it might start a little slow, but fingers crossed that I'm hoping that it will be fast enough for our purposes, because the bots still have quite a ways to fly. But we're left with all this junk, and this reverse factory here is trying to process them as fast as it can, but this is a good situation for using these active providers. So any resources that are produced are being pushed away. And it is true that it's going to be pushing away extra tiers of machines, which are going to go back into here and pollute it. But what can you do? I'll just have to keep an eye on it and reverse anything when it seems like it's too much. And we'll go from there. It's nice having this set to automatic now, so as the chests fill up, it just dumps them and takes them where they need to go. One other thing we can get back to is finally this radar to show the difference here. I guess I'll put it up there. Make sure buffer chest is on. So we'll throw that there, get rid of the radar. So now just asking for 50 plates instead of 1.6k. So that should be a much more efficient use of all of our stuff in our factory. So there's just not so much just being held in buffer. And these purple stack inserters seem to be pretty fast as is, so I'm not too concerned about them. Well, let's set this to 480, since that's where we want them all to go, and that's set to 10, which is good. All these are set. These all need to be 480, not that it really matters too much, it just makes sure that they all get in here if they could, which is what we're looking for. And there are quite a few extra radars in here, but whatever, it's one stack of radars, I think I'm fine with that. It's when it gets into many stacks of radars that there's a problem. So robots are on the way here. And they do have a long way to fly to put all these back up here, but this is the origin, so it makes sense that they would be placed up there, so then they can go anywhere in the factory they're needed, not necessarily just the main bus, because actually, where most circuits get used is down here at Science. Now this is a dump point for a lot of resources, because it tends to be used here quite a lot. That's so many robots doing things. But they're working away. You can see they're all coming here to handle this. But looks like we're getting some radars. So I guess we can switch this around. It looks like I don't normally carry them. I took them out of the inventory because they're just not used very often. Well, I suppose that makes sense, but it's also a little sad. I guess I'll not put them in there. And we'll just wait for the first time that we need one. But for now, we can kind of test it. Can't even see how big the radar is because it covers the entire minimap. But this kind of gives you an idea where if we're standing right here, we can put the radar like all the way out here and still have it cover us. So it's pretty good. It would be a slight energy increase to put these across the factory, but that seems kind of excessive. I'd rather just wait until we expand and then maybe consider doing that. And I guess this is all going to stay full because there's nowhere else for any of these items to go. And that's probably because our junk warehouse is completely full. And it is. Oh my goodness. That's not good. Mostly pipes though. And they tried to pull them in here as well, but it's because, same thing, all of these are full. And this is an example, like the other reverse factory, this is a anywhere but here situation, because there's no reason for resources to ever be in these chests. So anywhere else in the factory but there would be better. And here they come, taking stuff away. Pretty sure the bot network has been building some new bots in all of this. Yeah, kind of. We're getting close to 10,000 of each kind. Robots are going nuts, letting this start up again. Well, that thing finally got cleared out. There's probably some extra machines still scattered around here, but after seeing, oh my god, what it did to our logistics network, I'm kind of hesitant to try to reverse any more of them right now. Seems like we need way more parking spaces than just this. And another thing we can do to help out is put all this stuff on a HUD combinator just to make us aware of what's going on so we don't have to keep checking it all the time. But we'll call this junk warehouse. And there's technically more than one, but it's on our list now. So we can see all of the stuff that isn't being sent to where it needs to go. Each situation is kind of different, and I imagine all of this stuff is overloaded because it has nowhere else to go. And we probably don't need the rest of these here, because we can just keep picking stuff up out of here and get it sent to where it needs to go. And that's why you don't want to have a lot of extra resources captured in your various assembling systems, because not only is it inefficient to have all those resources caught up in buffer, but then when you actually want to try to reintegrate them into your factory, man is it a pain. Well, that was a bit of a detour for some radars, essentially. So let's go through here and look at some stuff. Well, there's the bigger transformer, but we don't really need that right now. There is the industrial furnace, but I don't feel like we need to be manufacturing those at the moment. Perhaps later. But I can kind of show you what it's like. We need a steel furnace, and one of them is right here, which lets us build one. And that's what it looks like. So it's a little bit bigger. It makes all of the same stuff, except it holds a whole bunch of modules. So the next time we need a furnace, we can use that. And now we have an extra item in our inventory. Well, whatever. Put it back into the system. Let's see. As far as vehicles, I did research the Mark V mining vehicle, but we can't make the fusion reactors quite yet. But we can make the fusion cells, which is a little weird, but the fusion reactor is the thing that goes into the character, and the fusion cells are the things that go into the mining vehicle, so they're not quite related. And then we have some of our power items, which can certainly be useful. We could upgrade our solar panels. This is the final tier of solar panel, and it's a 50% increase from 2 to 3. So compared to where we started, it's more than twice as good. So sure. And since we've already redone the panels to take use of the substations, we can just kind of drop these into place, just hopefully a little bit of it at a time, so we can try to reuse the existing panels rather than make a bunch of new ones. Alright, we'll let that thing run through the pipes. And while it does, we can make some new panels, and our setup is down here. And it's a little annoying that stuff is kind of in the way, so let's see if there's any existing belts we can take advantage of. We would need gold and silicon wafers. And I don't know if either of those would ever actually be on this bus. So let's check to see if it's actually worth making them here. For golds, it would go into high-level RoboPort stuff. And heat pipes. So, in that sense, yes. What about the silicon? Which would go into silicon wafers. Those are a little more limited. They would only go into essentially high-level solar panels and electronics components that we're already making. So in that sense, it really doesn't make sense to make the panels here. The gold we would use, but those silicon would just be a slot on the bus just for that and nothing else. So in that case, it actually makes the most sense to make the panels somewhere where there's gold and silicon. And I guess, if possible, titanium and green circuits. Well, titanium is probably never going to be on the circuits bus, but is it on the science bus? It is. Both are titanium and our green circuit. So in this situation, it actually kind of makes sense to make this on the science bus, which is a little funny. It's not like we need that many solar panels in the long run. And I would rather have bots moving these panels between the buses than take up a bus slot for an item that we're otherwise never going to use on the bus. And are the robots done with the concrete? Oh wow, look at that, they are. Well, I've got some more zone to expand, so we'll deal with that a little later. And it's always fine to wait a little bit because it needs to rebuild all of that concrete anyway. Okay, well, what's our other setup doing? We would certainly be able to upgrade all of that, and we probably should, just so we have an idea of the numbers. So let's place all these in here. And let's see, how fast is it going? Well, probably the reason why it has all these speed modules is because the machines are relatively slow without them. So we probably want to max out on them here. So we'll get all that maxed out, and how fast would the panels take here? Well, the big panels would be 1 a second, so even with all those speed modules, it doesn't really go that fast. But we do want to make sure that the output of resources will keep up. So let's set this to the better productivity, since we can use those on those plate choppers. And down here as well. So the plate choppers go into there. Let's just select everything. Looks like it is a net negative. So let's take out some speed modules and check it again, because I'm not too concerned with this thing going at like light speed, because we can wait a little while on solar panels. So now we do everything, and it is just barely positive doing it this way. So that will maintain our outputs, and I'm assuming that this crafting time is the same. So it's 4.5, 4.5, and 4.5. So now that we know, we can set this up where it's 3 speed modules, and then one of them can be the efficiency and one of them can be the pollution. Because we now know the ratio that it has to be. So let's see, we've got these right here, and since they're buffer chests, they won't fight with each other and send the resources between them. We'll do small solar panel 2400, medium panel 2400, and the same for the large. Just to make sure all of the resources get here first so they don't clog the other one. And man, there's so many solar panels in here that just got stuck in the system. But the idea is kind of the same. I don't think it's going to be necessary because we're probably not going to find ourselves picking any of these up. But we probably should. And that's an interesting place for silver. I guess that's just to put it in our inventory. I'm kind of afraid of taking it off because it might break something. So I guess I'll leave it. Luckily though, with the way this is set up, we only need 1 of each of these. So that should be all of the upgrades that we need. Let's just select everything now and see what we get out of it. Well, that's relatively easy to remember, 1.222. But at the same time, if we just use the same amount of modules, we should get the same performance. The bots will have to move stuff across, There is actually a different way of doing that. Besides moving the solar panels, we could move the resources themselves by bot to keep all of this stuff on the same bus and near each other. That might actually work pretty well. Because actually, the only thing we would need to send would be the silicon, because the gold makes sense to put on this bus because we would use it eventually for other things. So it's really not that big a deal to use it right here. So I guess we need to do a new setup, and we'll figure out exactly where it goes, but we can put this here for now, switch it to the next kind, and it would need silicon wafers. Let's see what it would be like with productivities in a plate chopper. How does that look? Well, it's nowhere close, and I guess that's just a ratio thing. Looks like we would need a total of 4 of them, which is certainly doable if we do some funny stuff like this. But even then, it's not quite enough, and let's make sure this is producing at the same rate. It is. I guess another question is how hard do we want to try to max this thing out? Well, I was really hoping for direct insertion here, but it doesn't look like that's going to be a possibility. That's going to be so many robots, though. Man. Well, I guess we can just bring a bunch of them in here. Well, but since it's in monosilicon form, look how much more compact it is. So actually, it would be fine to deliver them by robot. So let's compare all this now. Not quite enough. So we need one more machine in here. And now finally, we've got one of them covered. And since we are pretty close to a red belt, it might be easier for inserters if we just use a purple here. And we need about 7, which I think we're going to need the purple for that. To get 39 of them in is probably going to be quite a few inserters. Well, it feels like quite a few, but it kind of isn't, because purple inserters are insane. So let's just put 3 on there just to make sure it's filled up. Let's see, if we're only building one machine, then it might be cleanest if these extra resources came from, like, in here. Or more accurately, right there. And since our bus has 30 items per belt, and it's generally built around that, then we should be able to do 30 on each side of this. So we can put that in there. Maybe over there. And then it would also need to have the circuits, and we'll just do a purple belt again. Let's get rid of some flashing for now, so we can see where the inserters go. So that'll be circuits, and those will come from the side. And then the silicon is there. We will need to actually move the items over, as few as it would be, but since those are our buffer chests, we can just do normal requester chests. So this needs to request our solar panels, and how many would we want? Let's just go with a stack for now, because we don't want to go nuts. And then this one here needs to be buffer for the best kinds, and we would definitely want this to be the maximum to make sure they all get in there. And set this to be our quantity. The bots do have a long way to travel though, so we probably want this to be slightly higher than minimum. I don't know, let's try 100 for now. So if it's under 100, it'll swing. So that gets those items. We'll worry about those ones in a bit. But I think that does it. But since the recipe is slower for the big ones, it should work regardless with everything. So if we pick all this up and kind of mash it next to each other, it should work, but it looks like I placed it in slightly the wrong position here, because it would need to be like right there. This would go across, that would go across. Let's set this to the mediums, and this to the larges. Well, I mean, this isn't the worst place in the world to put it. It is kind of smushed with other stuff, but that's kind of how the factory is getting at this point. I wonder why the requests haven't been filtered here yet, since it is asking for solar panel 2s, but none of them are being delivered. Ah, didn't have buffer chest turned on. Well, that could be a convenient thing to make sure resources don't get sent until you're ready. Didn't really think about that as a benefit, but I suppose it is. Okay, let's get this set. I think we're going to end up having quite a few of these when everything's said and done, because we can kind of select every machine to see what we'd be dealing with. No. Just 9.9. That's still kind of a lot for robots to do, but they'll manage. And that's actually pretty cool just to see what kind of belts you would need for everything. And yeah, this is all pretty close to red belts, so it makes sense to have it on here. But because it all said smalls, kind of reminded me that these are not set correctly. So it should be small, medium, and larges that we're making. There we go. And the numbers are different because they produce them at a slower rate, but the input requirements are basically the same. So these can all just be one output. And that's going to be fun. Guess I'll unhook these for now. Requesting, I don't know, like 1,000, I suppose, of the monosilicon. Is it getting requested? It is. I'm kind of curious why. Can't help but feel that that's because there's a storage warehouse here. But I suppose that's fine because the storage warehouse technically counts as a valid provider for those items. Yep, there they go. So I guess it's fine. Okay, we need to get our metals on that first belt there and running out of spaces to get them all in here. But we do need the gold though. So let's make a request. First, get it set up. We could actually switch this to doing gold in coil form, but I don't know if I want to be dealing with that right now. We kind of did just finish up with that new ore processing setup, and I kind of don't want to go back to it again. I'm going to let a little bit of time pass first. So we'll set that to gold. Put the gold warning on here, and then configure it for our gold. Negative 512 stacks. Always feels like it takes a little while. But gold plates are on there, so it probably will. Of course, there it is. Second I start complaining about it, it shows up. I have the LTN setting set fairly slowly because as the factory gets bigger, it takes more and more resources to do those requests quickly. So I have it set to be kind of slow about it. But there it is, loading up on the gold, and it'll eventually catch up. But now that we have our direct sorting method, producing gold won't be an issue anymore. That's pretty easy because it's kind of a straight line. Oh, so close to being perfectly straight. You never get lucky in this game. No, you do. I'm just mad. Alright, let's go. Although we do have an underground right there. So let's do some beltception right here and just hop over it with a different colored belt. Okay, cool. The robots brought our resources in. And that is where radars are going to go, but we're only going to have like one more tier of radar. So it probably can fit in there just fine with direct insertion. I guess we can do a straight line here. And let's clean this belt up a little bit. There we go. Ah, it's so fast. Don't want to let them go in yet. Okay. Well, we should be ready to receive some solar panels. So let's enable the request from buffers. It's kind of cool to do it like that because that's a way to turn requester chests on and off if it's coming from buffer chests, which does make planning these things a little easier. And we're requesting 50 of each, which seems fine, so I think we're ready to test it out. So those go in, and now gotta do those, but it has to be probably on both sides here. Like that. Well, it's kind of a flurry of inserters here. But it's certainly building up. And the robots are delivering stuff. Since they're going to be doing a lot of work right here, it does make sense to give them somewhere to park. And how about some lights? But hey, it seems to be working pretty good. We're getting our solar panels in, and the ones in the back take the longest to build, so we're gonna have to wait the longest on those, but seems good. Well, they ran out of these. How many robots are on the way? Quite a few. Something tells me if this was perhaps 2,000, they would be able to make it here in time. And we can do another upgrade planner here. This time switching over from the smalls, the mediums, and the largest to our highest tier. And I'm not sure exactly how many of these we'd want to change at a time, but I also don't want it to take forever. So how about we do them in groups of 6? So something about like this. Doesn't have to be perfect. And they're all updated, which means we should be seeing some construction robots now. Grabbing what they can anyway. Hey, I noticed our junk warehouse lost all of those gears. The steel gears anyway, so it must have been that we needed them for something. And it seems like we did, because they are being consumed. Although I see what they're doing. They're just kind of going back and forth, although they must have still been consumed, but nonetheless it kind of shows that this is incorrect. But we also don't need that because gears are being used elsewhere and will be delivered to our inventory from that elsewhere. So we don't need to have it doing those circles like that anymore. And these seem to be running pretty consistently. We haven't run out of solar panels yet on either side, and we're actually using quite a few resources when you consider all of these panels as well. But it needs to go through all of these before it's going to start using those top tiers. Although this one isn't running at all, which is odd. So why is that? No glass. The recipe must have changed. Let's see, we have the glass here. This one's pulling it in and it doesn't even need it. And actually we can drop down. Except it's like this. So that way it won't be doing any distance changing and slowing down. Okay. So that part is running again. Has any of these run out? Well, the mediums ran out, which makes sense. And it looks like robots are delivering our panels. And it looks like they are skipping the buffer chests here and placing them down here when they can, because these are higher priority. Because, like, for example, the mediums, it says it's delivering 50. But they're also delivering them up here as well. And I guess we just don't need any smalls anymore. Yep. It makes sense because the setup is mostly big panels. By design. Only a couple of them are the mediums and smalls. Just for reducing the quantity of them. Doesn't really have any other purpose. So all that seems to be working. It's basically keeping up the resources because it's more or less an exact belt of them. And it's nice to see that salt is going down a little bit. So all of that logic is working correctly. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to work on better power poles and substations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.